We're going to be going on a historic trip along US 80. Come on, let's go. Alright everyone, today we're going to be doing US Highway 80. US Highway 80 parallels Interstate 20, so I decided to just pair these two highways together, because US Highway 80 is also very interesting by itself when it splits off from Interstate 20 in western Alabama. I'm also going to be doing historic US 80, so that'll also be fun, and US 80 is also concurrent with 516. So, let us get started with US Highway 80. But first, you're watching the TheDerpHog, where I make highways content on all sorts of different topics. If you've been enjoying it, be sure to hit that like button. And if you've been really enjoying it, be sure to smash that subscribe button so you're notified on all future videos. And if you really want to help out the channel, become a member today, where you get custom cool emojis, early access to future videos, along with one free extra request per month. And if you don't want to become a member, you can always just pay $3 for a intersection request in future videos. Those highways will be listed down in the description below, and I'll make sure to shout you out when that video releases. So let's get on with the highway. As we can see here, this is the map of US Highway 80, as current US 80 runs from a junction with Interstate 30 in Dallas over to Tybee Island, Georgia, while historic 80 used to run from San Diego, California all the way over to Tybee Island, Georgia. And this colored portion is the part route that I've been on personally. So with that, we're talking about eastbound US 80. So we begin here in San Diego, where we're meeting the 5 getting signed north for Mission Bay. I do not like seeing neighborhoods being signed on major interstates. This should be LA, Caltrans. Why are we starting off the video with a bad control city? And here we meet with the 5 South being signed for downtown San Diego, which I think is an alright choice, while 8 East is getting signed for El Centro. I mean, sure, you can put a California city on there too, but I also like to see Phoenix being signed here too as well. And on our way out of San Diego, we meet with the 805 here, and we're still getting signed east for El Centro. Here you're arming with Interstate 15 getting signed north for Riverside. Again, the same reasoning for Interstate 8. I don't mind seeing a California city on there, but I would also like to see an out-of-state place too, and this time it should be Las Vegas. And then ways up the road, we split off from Interstate 8, as we're going to be joining with California 79 here in the middle of the mountains. And this is where historic 80 split off from California 79. As you can see, that there's a mileage sign up ahead. And here we see that Pine Valley is our primary from 5 miles away. I believe both of these places are actually unincorporated communities, which is fine because I don't know who will be taking historic US 80 at this point, just to say that you've been on historic US 80. And here's where historic 80 is meandering through the mountains here. And then always down the road, we reunite with Interstate 8, and we're going to become more of a surface road to Interstate 8 here. In fact, here's some more awesome scenery of historic US 80. And as you can see here, we are now at a surface road for Interstate 8. Here you're arming with California Highway 94, now we're going to be concurrent with it, as we're about to meet with Interstate 8 once again. And this is where we split it off from California 94, as we're now being signed for Jacumba Hot Springs now. And this is the town of Jacumba Hot Springs, which is actually really close to the US and Mexican border. In fact, this wall here is actually the US and Mexico border. So that is pretty awesome. And here we can see that we're about to merge back into Interstate 8 and be concurrent with it as we head through the rest of California. And this here is just some awesome scenery here in Western California. I'd like to come out here someday and just see it for myself. And our next mileage sign, we get El Centro, only from 25 miles away. Why can't you do something beyond El Centro? Like, I don't know, Phoenix or Tucson or Yuma, not just El Centro from 25 miles away, Caltrans. And this is what we meet in El Centro, just California Highway 111, which is going south to Calexico, and North Fort Brawley, while we're now gang sign 8 east for Yuma. But our next mileage time, we actually get Tucson as our primary from 291 miles away. This is awesome. I like to see more of this here in California. And then a ways up the road, we're now entering into the city of Yuma and the state of Arizona, which is one of the best DOTs in the nation. And here we meet with US Highway 95, which is being signed for 16th Street, which makes sense because we're in the downtown Yuma-ish area. And this is why Arizona is the best, as they have Phoenix as our secondary from 165 miles away, and Tucson as our primary. And we can see here that Interstate 8 does a Interstate 85 as it meanders over itself. And this is where historic US 80 splits off from Interstate 8, but we're going to be staying on Interstate 8 here because historic US 80 just becomes another surface road for a long time. And this is where historic US 80 leaves Interstate 8 for the final time, as we're now going to be joining with Arizona 85. In fact, here we can see that Arizona 85 will take us to both Phoenix and Los Angeles, which are awesome control cities. And this is where we split off from Arizona 85 to head into downtown Phoenix. I mean, we're still wells way out of the city. And then after going through the Phoenix exurbs, we finally end up in downtown Phoenix at a junction with Interstate 17 and US Highway 60 here, which are getting awesome control cities. And now we're going to be turning off from Buckeye Road onto 17th Avenue, which is kind of ironic because we just met Interstate 17. And now we're going to be turning onto Van Buren Street, where historic 80 followed Van Buren Street through downtown Phoenix. And as you can see here, we can see the Phoenix skyline looming in the distance. And here we are going under Interstate 10 in downtown Phoenix. And now we're going over Arizona Highway 101 loop here, as we're exiting out of the Phoenix proper area and into the eastern exurbs. And now we're going over Arizona Highway 202 loop here, and we're going to be changing to Main Street now. And then on the far eastern side of Phoenix, we're now going to be joining with US Highway 60 here, as we're going to be heading east towards Globe. But historic US 80 actually leaves well before we reach Globe, as we're now going to be joining with Arizona Highway 79 South, signed for Florence and Tucson. And then we follow Arizona 79 all the way down to Arizona 77 here, as historic 80 followed Arizona 77. And our next mileage time, we do get Tucson as our primary from 25 miles away, so this is cool by Arizona. And this is where historic US 80 split it off from Arizona 77, as we're now going to be heading onto Tucson City Center exit. And now we're going to be turning onto Drockman Street here in the heart of Tucson. And US 80 took a turn onto Stone Avenue here, and then historic US 80 followed Stone Avenue all the way down to 6th Avenue and turned into 6th Avenue as we head toward Interstate 10. And here's where historic 80 turned off of 6th Avenue and onto Benson Road. And this is where historic 80 merged back into Interstate 10 as we head towards Benson, Arizona and Tombstone. And luckily, Benson, Arizona is not a control city on Interstate 10 because Arizona knows better. And this is where historic 80 left Interstate 10, as we're now going to become Arizona Highway 80 as we head towards Tombstone and Douglas. In fact, here is where Arizona 80 splits off from Interstate 10 Business, as we're now going to be heading towards Tombstone, Bisbee, and Douglas. And here is Tombstone, Arizona, as Arizona 80 passes through the heart of town. And this place is very famous, as a movie was made about it called Tombstone. And now we're meeting with Arizona Highway 90 just outside of Tombstone, and we're going to be concurrent with it as we head towards Douglas, Arizona. And then always up the road, we're now going to be joining with US Highway 191 as we head towards downtown Douglas. And this is where we split off from US Highway 191, as 191 will take you towards Mexico, while we just get Arizona 80 East. I wonder what we're being signed for. Oh, looks like we're getting signed for Lordsburg, New Mexico from 95 miles away, which I think is an alright choice because that's where we reunite with Interstate 10 and become concurrent with it. And now we're entering into the state of New Mexico, and we can see that there's a mileage sign in the distance, so let us see what's on it. We get Lordsburg as our primary still, so that is pretty awesome by New Mexico. And this is where we reunite with Interstate 10 as we're getting signed east for Lordsburg. No, I do not like that, New Mexico. That definitely should be Las Cruces or El Paso. Now we're meeting with US Highway 70, and if you want to see a video on US 70, it's in the top right corner here. I recently made one at the beginning of the year. And now in Deming, New Mexico, we meet with US Highway 180, which is one of our child routes, and we're now going to be concurrent with it as we head towards Las Cruces. And this is where US 70 splits off from Interstate 10 and US 180, as it just gets the Kentucky treatment, while we just get a laundry list of exits. Where's our pull-through for Interstate 10, New Mexico? But before we meet Interstate 25 in the heart of Las Cruces, this is where historic US 80 split off from Interstate 10 and US 180 to join with New Mexico 478 here. And if we follow New Mexico 478, we're now entering into the state of Texas. It's Texas time, yeehaw! And we're now going to be on Texas Highway 20 here as we head through the El Paso area. And this is where historic 80 turned right onto Mesa Drive here, as we're going to be meeting with Interstate 10. And here's that said meeting with Interstate 10 along with US 180 and US Highway 85. So I see TxDOT has the courage to sign US 85 here, which is pretty awesome. And here's where historic 80 is about to enter downtown El Paso, and man, I just like this awesome view of the skyline here. And after traveling through El Paso, we are now going under US 54 and Interstate 110 here. And meeting with US Highway 62, and you can see that's a very, very brief concurrency with it. And after paralleling Interstate 10 on Texas 20, we're now going to be reuniting with it, as we're now going to be heading towards Sierra Blanca. No, that should definitely be San Antonio. That is the next major town Interstate 10 is going to pass through. Are we going to have to see more West Texas town hopping? Because I do not want to see that again. And in Van Horn, Texas, we meet the start of US Highway 90 as historic 80 and Interstate 10 are going to be heading towards San Antonio. And this is where historic 80 splits off from Interstate 10 to join with Interstate 20, and we saw this last week at the start of the Interstate 20 video. So I'm just going to be skipping the Interstate 20 portion and going to be jumping straight to Interstate 30. And this is where historic US 80 splits off from Interstate 20 to join with Interstate 30 here as we head through downtown Fort Worth. Where historic 80 actually splits off well before downtown, as we're now going to be joining with Spur Highway 580 here. And here are meeting with Interstate 820 here on the outskirts of Fort Worth. And this is where we're going to be joining with US Highway 377, and we're now going to be concurrent with it as we head back towards Interstate 30. In fact, here is that reunion, and we're not going to be concurrent with it as we head towards Dallas now. And on our way to Dallas, we meet with Interstate 35W, and we say goodbye to US 377. And we here are going to be joining with Texas Highway 180 here, as it's meeting with Interstate 820 on the other side of Fort Worth. And on our way to Dallas, we actually passed by through Arlington, Texas, which is home to AT&T Stadium here. And then here are meeting with Texas Highway 360, as it for some reason doesn't get any control cities. And here is where Texas 180 meets the President George Bush Turnpike here. And then here is where historic 80 actually turns onto Loop Highway 12 here, as we're now going to be heading back towards Interstate 30 once again. In fact, here's that said meeting with Interstate 30 as it's still getting signed for Dallas and Fort Worth. And here is an awesome view of the Dallas skyline here, and we can see that we're going to be meeting with Interstate 35E in the distance. And here we are meeting with Interstate 45 and the southern terminus of US 75, as Interstate 30 is now getting signed east for Texarkana. And then after all of that, we finally are at the beginning of current US 80, which is getting signed east for Terrell, which I think is an alright choice. And our first major junction on current US Highway 80 is Interstate 635, and like always, it has no control cities. But let's see what we're signed for on 635 itself. Looks like we're still getting signed east for Terrell because we're still in the Dallas area. And also, this is my own picture of Interstate 635 meeting US Highway 80. And at random junctions, we're actually getting assigned for Forney for some reason, which is actually bigger than Terrell, but we don't really meet anything important in Forney. We meet with Spur 557 in Terrell, which will take you over to Interstate 20, but we don't meet anything in Forney, so why is TxDOT signing it? Anyways, here in Terrell, we meet with Spur Highway 557, which is in the control city of Shreveport because it could take you over to Interstate 20, while we're still getting signed east for Terrell because we're still a couple miles west of downtown. And on the other side of Terrell, we actually passed by the Bumblebee statue in front of the Chevron here in Elmo, Texas, so that is pretty cool. And our first mileage sign on current US Highway 80 is Grand Saline from 33 miles away as our primary. Personally, I like to see Manola here because Manola is actually bigger than Grand Saline, and we meet US 69 there, so I don't know why Wills Point is on here. But after going through Wills Point, we get another mileage sign with Manola as our primary from 30 miles away, which is a good choice. And after going through Edgewood, we get Manola still as our primary from 21 miles away, with Grand Saline as our secondary from 8. And here in Manola, we meet with US Highway 69 here, and US 80 is continuing east now. For our next mileage sign, we get Big Sandy now as our primary from 23 miles away. Big Sandy only has 1,200 people. Sign Longview. Longview should be our next control city, TxDOT. And this is where we meet in Big Sandy, just Texas Highway 155 here. I don't know why you're signing it. But look, in our next mileage sign, we do get Longview as our primary from 22 miles away. Personally, you could say you can sign Longview as far west as Terrell, but I bet more people will be taking Interstate 20 to get to Longview instead of staying on US Highway 80, so signing it from here makes sense. Or from when we met US 69, not since Big Sandy. And here we are meeting with US Highway 271 in Gladewater. And we're now meeting with US Highway 259 here in Longview, and let's see what we're signed for on 259. It looks like we're now getting signed for Marshall, which I think is an alright choice, because that is our next major town we'll be passing through. Here in Marshall, we meet with US Highway 59, and we're now going to be heading east towards Wascom. But before we make it to Wascom, we meet with Interstate 20, and we're now going to make current with 20 east here as we head towards Shreveport. And this is where the exit of US Highway 80 leaves us, as it'll head into downtown Wascom, as Interstate 20 is now going to be continuing east towards Shreveport. And after going through Wascom, we're now entering into the state of Louisiana. So let us see what Louisiana has to offer on US Highway 80. And right off the bat, they give us an awesome mileage sign with Shreveport as our primary from 20 miles away. So well done, Louisiana. Now we're meeting with US Highway 79, and 79 and 80 are now going to be concurrent as we head towards Shreveport. And on our way to downtown Shreveport, we actually passed by the Independence Bowl Stadium here, so that is pretty cool. I think the last time I watched the Independence Bowl was in 2017 when Florida State played in it. They did win that game, so that was also pretty cool to see. Now we're meeting with Interstate 20 in the heart of Shreveport, as it's now getting signed for Monroe. No, that should be Jackson. And here in downtown Shreveport, we're now going to be turning onto US 79 80ths. According to this should be well east of here because this is less than 1. So what is it doing here in Shreveport? And here's an awesome view of downtown Shreveport. And now we're meeting with US Highway 71 still in downtown. And then on the other side of the city, we're meeting with Interstate 220, which is getting signed for Shreveport, Monroe, and Texarkana. Now we're meeting with US Highway 371, and we're now being signed for Minden, which I think is an alright choice. And in Minden, we split off from US Highway 79 as they'll head northeast towards other states, while we're going to be paralleling Interstate 20 here. And outside of Minden, we're now getting signed for Gibbsland as our next control city. And then in Gibbsland, we're now getting signed for Arcadia, which I think is an alright choice. And then it's just US 80 getting signed for the smaller towns or the tertiary controls on Interstate 20. So I just decided to skip ahead to Ruston, where we're going to be joining with US 167 here. And this is where US 80 splits off from US 167 in the heart of Ruston, as US 167 will head north towards US 63 and Interstate 20. And here on the outskirts of Ruston, we're now getting signed for Monroe, which I think is a good choice for US Highway 80. And here in Louisiana, we actually get a really cool historic US 80 shield along with a current US 80 shield, so well done. Now we're meeting with Interstate 20 on the outskirts of Monroe, as 820 East is still getting signed for Monroe. No, that should be Jackson. We should be getting Monroe. And we are crossing over the Washita River and into downtown Monroe. And here's a cool view of downtown Monroe, as US 80 will be heading through downtown. And on the outskirts of Monroe, we're now meeting with US Highway 165, which will take you over to Interstate 20, once again, like always. And I decided to skip to our next town, Rayville, as US 80 doesn't really have any control cities for some random reason. But it is okay to give 20 all these like smaller towns, while 20 should get signed for Jackson. And here in Rayville, we're meeting with US Highway 425. And this here is actually Dunn, Louisiana, and there looks like there is not much here. And now here in Tallulah, Louisiana, we're meeting with US Highway 65, and you know what US 65 is? Hey, I know this highway. US Highway 65 is a 966-mile route as it runs from Clayton, Louisiana, all the way up to Albert Lea, Minnesota at a junction with Interstate 35. US 65 only has one child route, US 165, which actually runs through Monroe, Louisiana, and I've been on it. And I've also been on US 65 itself, where I got a couple of cool pictures with a missing US 65 shield. And US 65 meets both US 80 and US 70 along with Interstate 20. It also goes through some pretty big cities like Branson, Missouri, and Des Moines, Iowa. That's a little bit about US Highway 65, and let us get back to US Highway 80. And then after passing through Tallulah, we actually meet with Interstate 20 here in Delta, Louisiana. And like I said in the Interstate 20 video, there's not much here, so I don't know why they were signing it as a secondary on Interstate 20. And now we're going to be crossing over the Mississippi River and into Vicksburg, Mississippi with Interstate 20. And since we're concurrent with Interstate 20 all the way up until Clinton, I just skipped ahead to this exit here, where 80 is going to be splitting off from Interstate 20. And on the outskirts of Jackson, we meet with the other Interstate 220 along with US Highway 49, and for some random reason, they do not have any control cities. Not even for US 49. You could put something for 49, too. And then in the heart of Jackson, we meet with US Highway 51, which will take you into downtown Jackson and also over to Interstate 55 and 20. And on the outskirts of Jackson, we're now getting signed for Brandon, which I think is an alright choice. And in Brandon, we're now getting signed for Morton now as our primary, so, I mean, alright. And this here is in Morton, where we get an error shield made by MDOT, so that is pretty funny. And then since I couldn't really find anything in Morton as our next control city, I just jumped ahead to Forest, Mississippi. We're now getting signed for Newton, which definitely is the correct choice. But when we meet Interstate 20 at exit 100, we're now getting signed for Lawrence. And you want to know what Lawrence is? It's an unincorporated community, so why is it being signed? We're being signed for Newton in Forest, so why can't we sign it here? And then here in Newton, we're now getting signed for Hickory. I mean, even though Hickory is not a very big town, it's still a good choice, because if you want to get to Meridian from here, you're better off taking Interstate 20. So Hickory is still a good choice. And then I jumped ahead to the outskirts of Meridian. We're going to be joining with Interstate 20 for a second time. And we're going to be heading through the city with Interstate 20. And this is where we split off from Interstate 20, but for some reason MDOT is not telling us this. We just get an exit for Mississippi Highway 39 North. Where is US 11 and 80? I want to see those two highways too. And then US 11 and 80 parallel Interstate 20, and we're now entering into the state of Alabama. And this is where we split off from US Highway 11 and Interstate 20, as we say goodbye to those three highways forever, as we're going to be heading towards Demopolis. For our next mileage time, we actually get Selma as our primary, which is, I believe, bigger than Demopolis, so that is pretty awesome. And then here in Demopolis, we meet with US Highway 43, and we're now going to be concurrent with it. Our next mileage time, we get Fawnsdale as our secondary, with Selma still as our primary from 49 miles away. And then I skipped ahead to Selma, where we get two separate mileage signs for some reason. We did one liner here with Whitehall from 18 miles away, and that mileage sign is this one here with Montgomery on the bottom line from 47. Personally, you can just keep this one and get rid of that Whitehall. No need for it, LDOT. And then on the outskirts of Montgomery, meet with US Highway 31, and for some reason it does not have a control city. Now we're going to be joining with Interstate 65, and we're now going to be concurrent with that as we head north toward downtown Montgomery and the city of Birmingham. But we leave well before we reach Birmingham, as we're now going to be joining with US 82, which will take us to both US 231 and 331, so that is a lot of information to process. And here is the northern terminus of US Highway 331, as 80 and 82 are going to be continuing around the city of Montgomery. And this is where US 80 now is going to be joining with Interstate 85 as we head northeast towards Atlanta, which is awesome. And if you're going to check out a video on Interstate 85, it's in the top right corner here. But again, we leave well before Atlanta, as we're now going to be joining with Alabama Highway 126, signed for Wog and Pike Road. I decided to skip ahead to Tuskegee. We're going to be joining with US Highway 29 here, as we're now going to be concurrent with it as we head towards Auburn and Columbus, Georgia. In fact, we split off from US Highway 29 as we're now getting signed for Phoenix City and Columbus, which are great choices. And here in Phoenix City, we meet with another child of ours, US Highway 280. We're now going to be concurrent with US Highway 431. And this is where we split off from US 431 and 280, as for some reason they get two separate pull-throughs, while 80 East is getting signed for Columbus, which is, again, awesome. And then here we are, crossing over the Chattahoochee River and into the state of Georgia. Don't worry, Georgia does give us an actual welcome to Georgia sign, along with an entering Eastern time zone. And our first major junction in Georgia is both Interstate 185 and US Highway 127, and 185 gets awesome control cities, while US 27 just gets the Kentucky treatment here. Interesting. Maybe it's because it goes into downtown Columbus, so makes sense. And on Interstate 185, we're now getting signed east for Macon. That is awesome by GDOT. This is totally awesome. And even 6 up on our next mileage line, we get Macon as our primary from 84 miles away. Well done, G-Dot. You're totally outdoing yourselves for our first portion of 80. But our next mileage line, G-Dot reverts back to their old ways, and we're now getting signed for Manchester for 21 miles away. You wanna know where Manchester is? It's on Georgia 41. What happened to our Macon, G-Dot? I want to see Macon. Bring Macon back. But after Georgia 41 splits off from us, Macon does come back from 61 miles away. It should have been on that last mileage line too. Now we're meeting with the great US Highway 19, and we're now going to be concurrent with it as we head up towards Atlanta. And our next mileage line, we get Thomaston on the top line and Griffin as our primary from 60 miles away as we're concurrent with US Highway 19. And this is where we split off from US Highway 19 as it's in signed for Thomaston, and we're getting signed for Macon still. Personally, I like to see Griffin here because that's where 19 reunites with 41. But this Macon for us is awesome. And if you want to check out a series on US 19, both made by me and Quartermont, it's in the top right corner here. In Roberta, Georgia, we meet with US Highway 341 as 80 is now going to be continuing towards Macon still. In fact, our next mileage line, we still get Macon as our primary from 27 miles away. And on the outskirts of Macon, we meet with Interstate 475, which is being signed for Valdosta going southbound. I'm pretty sure northbound is Atlanta. Now we're meeting with US Highway 41, and we're just going to be continuing east towards downtown Macon. But before we get to downtown, we meet with Interstate 75, which is getting signed for Atlanta and Valdosta. I mean, Valdosta is better than Lake City, but I prefer to see Tampa here. And then here we meet with Interstate 16 on the other side of Macon before we meet with US 23. And here's that said highway with US Highway 23 and US 129 alternate, as we're now going to be heading away from Macon and towards Cochrane and Dublin. And here's where we split off from US Highway 23, as we're now going to be heading towards Jeffersonville and Dublin. In fact, at our next junction, we are getting signed for Jeffersonville. No, I want to see Dublin. Dublin is way larger than Jeffersonville, and plus we meet a couple of major highways in Dublin. So, if you can sign Dublin for everything else, G-Dot, why can't you do it on US Highway 80? But luckily, in Jeffersonville, we are getting signed for Dublin, which is the correct choice. Now we get our one-liner here with just Dublin from 7 miles away. I mean, I'd prefer to see something else here too, besides Dublin. And then here in the heart of Dublin, we meet with US Highway 441 along with US 319. But for some reason, Georgia 29 is getting billing over US 319. And then in East Dublin, we split off from US Highway 319 as 80 is now going to be heading towards... what? You can see here that now we're going to be signed for Swainsboro, which I think is an alright choice because that's where we meet with US 1 and it's pretty sizable. Our next mileage time, we get Statesboro as our primary from 71 miles away, which is an even better choice. So I decided to skip ahead towards Swainsboro, where we meet with US 1, the great US 1, and I actually will be doing a US 1 series in the next month, so stay tuned for that. And then our next mileage time, we still get Statesboro as our primary from 35 miles away, and we're still 3 miles out from downtown Swainsboro. That is pretty far. Now we're meeting with US Highway 25 in the unincorporated community of Hope You Lick It. Our next mileage time, we get Statesboro on the top line and Georgia Southern University as a control city? Since when did colleges become control cities? So, in that case, can I sign Florida State on Interstate 10 or Penn State on Interstate 99 if GDOT is now letting colleges be a control city? But here in the heart of Statesboro, we're meeting with US Highway 301 and we're now getting signed for Savannah, which is definitely an awesome choice. In our next mileage time, we do get Savannah as our primary from 53 miles away. And on our way towards Savannah, we meet the eastern terminus of US Highway 280, and we also now pick up with Georgia Highway 30, as we're still getting signed for Savannah. And then on the outskirts of Savannah, we meet with the Great Interstate 95, which is getting signed north for Florence and south for Brunswick. I do not like that at all. That should be the Jacks, while 95 north should probably get signed for like Charleston or Columbia. No need for Florence. And I also did get my own picture of Interstate 95 meaning US Highway 80, and we're now getting signed for Garden City, which I think is an alright suburb. And here in Garden City, we meet with Georgia Highway 25 connector, which will actually take you over to Interstate 516 here. And we can see that there's another mileage sign in the distance. And we get Thunderbolt now as our primary from 9 miles away. That's a strange suburb name. And here we are meeting with Interstate 516, and we're now going to be concurrent with it as we head through Savannah. Here is where 516 and US 80 meet with Interstate 16 and US 17, as we're now just going to become the Lines Parkway. Why not give us an actual control city? And this is where US 17 and US 80 splits off from Interstate 516, as 80 is getting signed for Savannah, while 17 south is for Brunswick. Now, Brunswick belongs on US 17, but not on Interstate 95 GDOT. Also, if you want to check out a series on US Highway 17, it's in the top right corner here. And here is where US 80 actually goes through the heart of Savannah here, and man, there's a lot of trees. And then on the other side of Savannah, we meet with the Harry S. Truman Parkway here. And let us see what we're signed for on this presidential parkway. It looks like we're not getting signed for Tybee Island, which is definitely a correct choice, because you can't really sign anything beyond Tybee Island. Are you going to sign the Atlantic Ocean or something? And here's US 80 crossing over a causeway and onto Tybee Island. And here is downtown Tybee Island as US 80 is going through the heart of the city. And then we finally end US 80 here on Tybee Island, and we get an awesome plaque for the end of US Highway 80, so that is pretty cool. So with that, we end US Highway 80 and we move on to, the places I'll go. So these are all the places that I'd visit if I ever was on more of US Highway 80. If you have any suggestions for any of other cool places that I should visit, please let me know down in the comment section below, and I'd definitely check those out whenever I'm on US 80 once again. So that ends US Highway 80. Thank you all so much for watching this episode on US Highway 80 eastbound. I hope you got to enjoy learning a little bit more about the highway, and I also hope you enjoyed the historic portion of US Highway 80. So with that, here are my next few highways. If you have any intersection requests for any of these upcoming highways, please let me know down in the comment section below, and I'd love to shout you out when these videos release. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all next week as we're heading to Birmingham for 459.